She mocked me for tripping over air in 10th grade. 5 years later, she didn't even recognize the man standing next to her at the bistro. The high school hallway smelled of floor wax, cafeteria pizza, and the sharp, metallic scent of teenage judgment. It was a Tuesday in October. The group always moved in a specific formation, bound together by the fact that they all hated going home. Mark and Julie were the core. Mark was the steady, quiet one, mostly because he was terrified of setting off his father, a man known to the neighborhood for his shouting matches and thrown bottles. Julie was the peacekeeper, vibrating with anxiety, trying to be perfect so her narcissistic mother wouldn't have anything to criticize. They clung to each other like shipwreck survivors. Sarah walked slightly ahead of them. She was small, sharp, and visually arresting. Her hair was the color of oxidized copper wire, a deep, burning metallic red that frizzed slightly in the humidity. Her face was dusted with constellations of freckles that made her look innocent, but her green eyes were hard, perceptive, and constantly scanning for weaknesses. She curated her image like armor, vintage denim, combat boots, a sneer ready for anyone who looked at her too long. And then there was Ben. Ben trailed 10 feet behind, the straggler. At 15, he was an architectural disaster. 6'1", 140 pounds, all tensile strength and no stability. He had hands the size of dinner plates that he didn't know what to do with. He existed in a state of perpetual, frantic motion because standing still felt awkward. Sarah hated having him there. She tolerated him only because Mark insisted. "Does he have to walk with us?" Sarah whispered to Julie near the lockers, loud enough for Ben to potentially hear. "He looks like a baby giraffe on ice. It ruins the vibe." "He's Mark's only safe place," Julie whispered back, eyes pleading. "His dad locked him out again last night. Ben let him sleep on his floor." Sarah sighed, rolling her eyes. "Fine, but if he trips into me, I'm ending him." Ben, oblivious to the nuances, was just happy to be included. He tried too hard. He watched parkour videos on YouTube and tried to replicate them to impress Mark, to be the fun one. The incident happened at lunch. The cafeteria courtyard had a low brick wall separating the pavement from the landscaping. To Ben, it was an obstacle course. To Sarah, it was just lunch. "Watch this," Ben called out, voice cracking slightly. Sarah didn't even turn around. She bent to a red apple, staring at her boots. "Nobody wants to watch you, Ben. Just sit down." Ben ignored her. He ran. He was all elbows and knees, a collection of sharp angles moving too fast. He hit the takeoff point. He missed. His toe clipped the top brick. The physics went wrong instantly. Ben didn't vault. He windmilled. His arms flailed like a drowning man trying to climb a ladder of air. He went face first into a decorative holly bush. There was a crunch, a snap, then a heavy thud. The bush was sharp. It held him there, suspended upside down for a second, his long legs kicking the sky, before dropping him into the dirt. The courtyard went silent. Then the laughter started. It was brutal. Mark sighed, putting down his sandwich to go help. But Sarah was closer. She stood over the bush. She looked down at Ben, who was tangled in branches, bleeding from a scratch on his cheek, covered in mulch. She looked at him with cold, unadulterated disdain. "You are a disaster," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was mean. "Look at you." Ben wiped mud from his eye, his face burning red. "I slipped." "You crashed," Sarah corrected, her voice dripping with venom. "You're a hazard, Ben. Try walking next time. It's faster." She turned to Julie. "I'm going inside. I can't be seen with this." She walked away, but the nickname stayed. Crash. It wasn't a joke between friends. It was a label. It was her way of reminding him that he was the clown at the back of the parade. They went to the same state university, but their lives fractured into two parallel tracks. Ben disappeared into the engineering department. He stopped trying to be flashy. He started learning about load paths and tensile strength. He and Mark were roommates. They spent their Friday nights avoiding parties. Mark saw the change first. "You're going to the gym again?" Mark asked one morning at 6 a.m., watching Ben chug a protein shake. "I'm tired of being skinny," Ben said, looking at his lanky reflection in the mirror. "I'm tired of taking up space without filling it." It wasn't a movie montage. It was boring. It was 3 years of lifting heavy iron. Ben filled out. His shoulders widened. He grew a thick beard to hide the baby face. He stopped tripping because he finally understood gravity. But inside, he was still the guy who played Halo and got nervous around pretty girls. On the other side of campus, Sarah was in the business school. She and Julie were roommates. Sarah was busy becoming perfect. She ran charity galas. She wore heels to class. She kept her red hair sleek and straightened, ironing out the frizz, ironing out the flaws. Their paths crossed rarely. When they did, it was awkward. It happened in their junior year. The library entrance was a slick floor of tracked-in water from a heavy storm. Sarah came rushing in, distracted by her phone. She hit a wet spot on the floor. Her heels slid. She flailed, ready to hit the terrazzo. A hand clamped onto her arm. Solid, immovable. It stopped her fall instantly. She gasped, looking up. Ben was holding her. He was carrying a stack of textbooks in his other arm. Advanced structural analysis, fluid dynamics, effortlessly. He wasn't teetering. He smelled like rain and laundry detergent. Easy, Ben said. His voice was deeper, vibrating in his chest, but he looked at the floor, not her eyes. He was shy. Sarah yanked her arm away, straightening her coat. She felt a flash of heat, embarrassment mixed with confusion. "I'm fine," she snapped, her defensive walls slamming up. "Your big feet were in the way. You tripped me." Ben shrank back slightly, his shoulders hunching a fraction. He shifted the books, looking uncomfortable. "Right," he mumbled. "Sorry. Walk safe, Sarah." He walked away fast, ears turning red. Sarah watched him go, rubbing her arm where he had grabbed her. It felt warm. She shook her head. "It's just Crash," she told herself. "He's still a mess." 5 years passed after graduation. The group kept in touch, but separately. Mark finally cut off his abusive father. Julie went no contact with her mother. They only had each other and their 2 best friends. Then came the text from Mark. "Dinner. The Bistro downtown. 7 p.m. Julie, and I have news. We need the family." Sarah arrived at 7:10 p.m. She walked into the bistro, trendy, loud, exposed brick. She spotted Mark and Julie in a booth near the back. Sitting next to Mark was a stranger. From the back, the stranger was a wall. He wore a charcoal Henley shirt that fit tight across a broad, muscular back. His shoulders blocked the view of the kitchen. He had dark hair, short and messy. Sarah walked over. "Okay, I'm here. Sorry, traffic was a nightmare." She looked at Mark and Julie. "What's the big news?" She glanced at the large man next to Mark. He was looking down at a menu, ignoring her entrance. He had a thick, dark beard and hands that made the silverware look like toys. "And who is the lumberjack?" Mark choked on his water. Julie started laughing. The man lowered the menu slowly. He looked up at Sarah. He didn't look aggressive. He looked hesitant. His dark brown eyes darted to her face, and then away, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to look. "Hello to you too, Sarah," he said. The voice was gravel, rough, textured, still loud. Sarah froze. The eyes. The hesitation. "Wait," Sarah whispered. She narrowed her green eyes. "Crash." The man took a sip of water. His hand shook just a tiny bit. "It's Ben," he said quietly. "But sure." Sarah laughed. It was a sharp sound of disbelief. She slid into the booth opposite him, scanning his face, her gaze dropping to his chest, then his arms. "No way," she said. "Look at you. Did you finally stop falling downstairs and start eating them instead? You're huge." Ben blushed. The red color rose up from his neck, visible even past the beard. He rubbed the back of his neck, looking at the table. "I work in construction, Sarah," he mumbled. "I lift heavy things. It happens." "He's the best man, Sarah," Mark said, beaming. "And you're the maid of honor." Julie squealed. "We're getting married. Just us. No parents. Just the 4 of us planning it." The news registered. There was hugging. But Sarah kept glancing at Ben. He was solid, physically imposing, but he was sitting with his shoulders hunched forward, trying to make himself smaller. "Oh, this is going to be a disaster," Sarah said, falling back into her old teasing, because the new reality was making her stomach flutter weirdly. "Please tell me he isn't in charge of the actual rings. He'll trip and throw them into a sewer grate. I am not diving into a sewer, Crash." Ben looked up. He met her eyes for a second, then looked at his coffee. A small, shy smile tugged at his beard. "I build bridges now, Sarah," he said softly. "I think I can handle a ring box." He looked at her hands on the table, small, manicured, perfect. "Just watch where you walk in those heels," he added, his voice low. "Ground's uneven." Sarah's mouth opened slightly. It wasn't an insult. It sounded almost protective. The heat rushed to her face. "I have excellent balance," she said, smoothing her dress. Okay, Ben said. Good. The wedding was a DIY operation. Mark and Julie had a budget of zero and a lot of trauma. They rented an old, dilapidated barn on a farm property. It was cheap because it was falling apart. We fix it up, Mark said. It's symbolic, building something new from something broken. It's a health code violation, Sarah muttered, standing in the doorway in her designer jeans. There are birds in here. I can fix the structure, Ben said. He was walking around the perimeter, touching the beams. He looked in his element. He wasn't hunched over anymore. He was inspecting the load paths. The bones are good. We just need to clean it out, reinforce the loft, and run some lights. The next 2 months were physically exhausting. The four of them spent every weekend at the barn. The tension between Ben and Sarah shifted. It wasn't avoidance anymore. It was constant, confusing friction. The first major task involved the seating. They had rented heavy wooden church pews for the ceremony, which needed to be unloaded from a truck and arranged in rows on the grass. Sarah was trying to drag one end of a pew. Her boots were slipping in the grass. Her face was flushed, her red hair frizzy in the heat. I got it, she grunted, barely moving the wood. Let go, Sarah. Ben's voice came from behind her. He stepped in. He wasn't wearing his flannel anymore, just a gray t-shirt stained with sweat. He grabbed the pew. He didn't drag it. He squatted, wrapped his arms around the heavy oak, and lifted the entire bench. He walked it into place and set it down gently. He did it 12 times. Sarah stood there, holding a clipboard, useless. She watched the sweat darken his shirt. She watched the veins in his forearms pop as he gripped the wood. She felt a strange tightness in her chest. He walked back to the truck, wiping his forehead. He stopped near her. He smelled of oak and Old Spice. You okay? He asked, noticing her staring. He looked self-conscious again, wiping his hands on his jeans. I'm fine, Sarah said, her voice sounding breathy. She looked at his hands, scarred, rough, massive. You're efficient. Ben shrugged, looking at his boots. It's just leverage. 3 weeks later, the work had moved to the interior. They were scrubbing the old wood walls, prepping them for varnish. Sarah gasped and dropped her sponge. Damn it, she hissed, holding her hand against her chest. What? Ben was there instantly. He dropped his tools and crossed the room in 2 strides. Splinter, she said, tears pricking her eyes. A big one, right in the palm. Let me see. He took her hand. His hand engulfed hers completely. His skin was rough like sandpaper, but his touch was incredibly gentle. He held her wrist steady. Sarah looked up at him. He was focused entirely on her palm. His face was inches from hers. She could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. She could feel the heat radiating off his chest. She stopped breathing. Ben grabbed the first aid kit from the nearby windowsill. He pulled out the precision tweezers. He bit his lip in concentration. Hold still, he murmured. He pulled the splinter out in one smooth motion. Got it, he said. He didn't let go of her hand immediately. He ran his thumb over her palm, checking for other debris. The sensation sent a jolt of electricity straight up Sarah's arm. She looked at him. He looked up. For a second, he didn't look shy. He looked intense. Then he blinked, realized he was holding her hand, and dropped it like it was hot. I'll wash that, Ben stammered, stepping back, his ears burning red. Infection risk. Old wood. Right, Sarah whispered, clutching her hand. Thanks. Crash. But the name had no bite. It was soft. The day before the wedding. The venue was set. The pews were out. The lights were strung. Then the sky turned green. A massive summer thunderstorm rolled in. The wind hit the barn like a hammer, rattling the loose tin on the roof. The doors. Mark yelled. The big sliding doors are stuck open. The rain is coming in. The rain would ruin the reception floor they had spent weeks sanding and sealing. The four of them ran to the massive barn doors. They were on rusted iron tracks. They were 12 feet high and weighed hundreds of pounds. Sarah grabbed the handle of the left door. She pulled. It didn't budge. The wind was howling, blowing rain into her face, soaking her shirt. It's stuck, she screamed. The track is bent. Mark and Julie were pushing the right door, but the wind was fighting them. Ben tossed his flannel shirt onto a dry workbench and ran to Sarah's side. He was soaked instantly, his hair plastered to his forehead. Move, Ben shouted over the thunder. Sarah stepped back, slipping in the mud. Ben didn't push. He grabbed the edge of the door with both hands. He planted his boots in the mud. He dropped his hips. Ben, it's rusted shut. Sarah yelled, wiping rain from her eyes. "We need a truck to pull it." Ben ignored her. He roared, a guttural sound of effort. The muscles in his back bunched under the wet t-shirt. His biceps strained, looking like they might tear the fabric. The metal groaned in protest. The door moved an inch. He reset his grip. He pulled again. The rusted wheels squealed against the track. He was fighting friction, rust, and the wind. He was moving a wall by hand. "Come on." Ben yelled at the door. With one final, explosive heave, he yanked the door along the track. It slammed shut with a boom that rattled the walls. He spun around and ran to Mark and Julie. He threw his weight against their door, adding his power to theirs. That door slammed shut too. He dropped the latch. The barn went dark and quiet, save for the sound of rain hammering the roof. Ben bent over, hands on his knees, gasping for air. He was dripping wet. He was shaking from the exertion. Sarah stared at him. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She had never seen anything so capable, so raw. She walked over to him. She reached out and touched his wet shoulder. "Ben," she whispered. He looked up. His eyes were wild for a second. Then they softened. He straightened up, wiping water from his face. "It's dry," he said, catching his breath. "The floor is safe." Sarah looked at the massive door he had moved. Then she looked at him. She didn't have a joke. She didn't have an insult. "You're bleeding," she said, pointing to his knuckles. They were scraped raw from the iron door. Ben looked at his hand. He shrugged. "It's fine. Just a scratch." He looked at her. She was shivering, wet and cold. "Here," he said. He walked over to the workbench, grabbed his dry flannel shirt, and wrapped it around her shoulders. It was warm. It smelled like him. "Thanks," she said, pulling it tight. They stood there in the dark barn, the air charged with ozone and adrenaline. Ben looked like he wanted to say something, but he just nodded awkwardly. "I'm gonna check the windows," he mumbled and walked away. The wedding was perfect. The rain cleared by morning. The sun hit the wet grass, making everything sparkle. Mark and Julie cried through their vows, surrounded by the work their friends had done. At the reception, the barn was filled with music. It was a small party, 50 people, but it felt full. It was late. Sarah sat alone on a hay bale near the open doors, watching the fireflies. She was exhausted. She had kicked off her heels. She was wearing her silk bridesmaid dress, but she felt stripped bare. Ben walked over. He was wearing a navy suit that fit him perfectly, though he looked uncomfortable in the tie. He held 2 beers. "Seat taken?" he asked. "For you?" "No," Sarah said. He sat down. The hay bale creaked. He handed her a beer. "We did good," Ben said, looking at the party. "We did," Sarah said. She took a sip. She turned to look at him. "You saved the day yesterday. With the door. I don't think anyone else could have moved that." Ben shrugged, staring at the bottle label. "Adrenaline. And WD-40. "No," Sarah said. "It was you." She shifted closer to him. Their knees touched. Ben didn't pull away. "You know," Sarah said softly, looking at his profile, "I was horrible to you in high school." Ben flinched slightly. "We were kids, Sarah." "I was a mean kid," she corrected. "I called you Crash because I wanted to make you small. Because you were clumsy, and I was scared of anything that looked messy." She took a breath. "But you're not messy, Ben. You're the most solid person I know." Ben turned to look at her. His eyes searched her face, looking for the punchline, looking for the trick. "I still trip sometimes," he said quietly. "When I'm nervous." "Yeah," Sarah smiled. It was a genuine, soft smile that made her freckles dance. "What makes you nervous?" Ben looked down at her lips, then back up to her eyes. His ears turned pink. "You," he admitted. "You always made me nervous. That's why I fell in the bush." Sarah's heart stopped. "What?" "I was trying to show off," Ben said, a wry smile hiding in his beard. "I saw you watching. I wanted to look cool. Instead, I ate dirt." Sarah laughed. It was a breathless sound. "You idiot." "Yeah," Ben agreed. "I know." The music inside changed to a slow song. "So," Sarah said, putting her beer down, "are we going to sit here and talk about high school, or are you going to ask me to dance?" Ben looked at his hands, the hands that moved walls. Then he looked at her. "I might step on your toes," he warned. "I'm clumsy." "It's okay," Sarah said, standing up in the grass barefoot. She held out her hand. "I'll take the risk." Ben stood up. He took her hand. His grip was warm and encompassing. "See?" she said softly, stepping into his space, looking up at him. "Not so messy anymore." Ben didn't say anything. He just pulled her in close, his arm going around her waist, holding her like she was something precious that he was terrified to drop. And as they started to sway in the moonlight outside the barn they built, Ben didn't trip. Not even once.